All right. So this immunity ruling where the Supreme Court has granted immunity, specifically to Trump, and we'll talk about that a little bit in his case, but also tried to say they're setting a new trend for the future of the world. They use this crazy language that they think they're like, these gods on a hill that are going to define how the world works. And they pretty much have done that. But they waited for the last possible minute to do this on purpose. Like they did this and then bye, we're out. Because that was their last day of their session, and last second of their session. Last thing they do, then bye, gone. So they didn't want to play this hand too early because they wanted this pretense that they're impartial up until this, right? Because they knew once this, I don't know, American people sometimes don't see things.
What pretense of being impartial are you talking about?
They wanted to sort of to defend that they could be impartial because they would occasionally vote this or that. But this ruling clearly shows
in this last 2 years, they have done nothing impartial.
Yeah.
Nothing.
But compared to this is a whole new step down that path.
Of partisan?
Of partisan, yeah, because this says we are 100% Trump supporters. We are 100% on board with January 6th and everything those people stood for and wanted to do. We are 100%.
6 of them did that.
6 of them did that.
Which is all that was needed.
That's all that's needed, yeah.
5
of them is all that's needed.
Right.
So they are saying we are in bed with the rioters. We are in bed with the revolutionaries that want to destroy the Constitution and the country. We are on board with that. 100%. Anything Trump does he's going to be found immune on. And yet we're also going to hold back that deciding what is an official act and what isn't will be up to us every single time. Mm-hmm. We didn't write any rules about it that anyone could parse out and understand. And we will be the final arbiter. Even if we write rules, it's still going to come to us. And then we will be the ones to decide what's an official act and what's not. And you know what the rule's going to be? If it's Trump, it's an official act. He's immune. If it's anybody else, they're not immune. Mm-hmm. So these people that are saying Biden could go do these things, that's not true because these guys will declare if Biden does it, it's going to be found to be he's going to be found to be not immune, and he'll be held to the rule of law. And any future Democratic Party president will be held to the rule of law prospectively, but any Republican president, but especially Trump, will be not held. Everything will be shown to be he's immune. And so that's what they said in this ruling. That's what they're telling the American people. That's what they're telling the world, that we're 100% behind Trump and he can't be prosecuted for anything, ever. And no Republican president can either. And that's what they're telling us. And when you combine this immunity, this absolute immunity, they're going to give Trump and Republican presidents, combined with absolute pardon power, which all presidents already have, that pretty much means that any future Republican president, but especially Trump, he can bypass legislative and judicial constraints. It fundamentally alters the balance of power in the U.S. And this will lead. I mean, that means that basically abuses of power have been laid before him, and then also total policy instability because policies can be willy-nilly either implemented or not at the president's whim. And so that brings me to something we're starting to see some people talking about. And we talked to a friend who was losing their mind about this recently, about Project 2025. You may or may not have heard of it. It's like a Heritage Foundation thing. A bunch of other people are behind it. And a lot of former Trump people that were appointed by Trump and worked in his administration are behind it. And it's kind of a Christian nationalist thing as well. And so that's out there. And you're starting to see some people talk about this, right? So this thing is out there. And Trump, and so one reason I'm also bringing it up because Trump tried to distance himself from it. Did you see that?
Yes, I did see that. He is distancing himself from it.
Yeah, he's trying to. He said, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, well,
I don't know anything about it. But then he also said,
I never met these people.
I never met these people. But at the same time, I also, I disagree with some of the things in the thing I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
I disagree with it. And he said some of the things are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal.
Right.
The thing he doesn't know anything about.
Right.
And he wishes him luck.
Yes. Yes.
And I have nothing to do with them.
Yes.
Nothing to do except you appointed a bunch of them. And also, they're the guys that got you to pick the 6 justices.
But this is his ploy, though, too. Because Project 2025 is pretty radical.
Right.
I mean, it's not pretty radical. It is flat out radical. And this is the way he 100% knows what it is. He's 100% on board.
Right.
But this is his way to get these people who are Republicans, but are kind of online and go, well, he's not really into it, so he's not going to run with it.
It gives them like
are you effing kidding me?
It gives them like a story, a narrative
Yes.
they can tell,
Yes.
right? And it also gives this other people this narrative to say anybody that's got their hair on fire about this is just overreacting because I don't even know anything about it. That it also gives that cover, right? People can say, oh, you're just overreacting. Well, okay, so here's the thing though. So Project 2025, bunch of stuff in it. We are definitely going to talk about that, but not today. It's 900 some odd pages, and we will definitely talk about it. But we're going to talk about another thing. And this is something Trump can't say he has nothing to do with because it's on his website. It's his thing he's calling Agenda 47.
Oh, yeah. Because he's the 47th president.
Yeah, because So this is his thing he calls, and that's So what that thing is. So we're going to talk about that instead.
That's
so
2025 light.
That's 2025 light.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that thing instead. So what if you look at this thing? It's basically a bunch of videos, of things Trump has said, and then from that you can.
What exactly does he call it? He calls it
Agenda. He calls it Agenda 47, and it's on his website. If you go to Trump. What is it? DonaldTrump.com.
No way. Don't you think I want to have that on my
and your search history?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but he can't walk away from this. He can't distance himself from this because it's on his website and it's him talking.
Right.
So it's if you kind of parse it out, you have to kind of figure out because it's not like a list of the policies, but I've sort of parsed it out, and I'm gonna sort of spoil. If I'm ever able to do it, I do plan to do a real Outrage Overload episode out this and kind of try to get some experts to say, hey, how real is all this stuff? But today we're going to do it in a sort of a less expert way where it's just me figuring that stuff out, that's doing the best research that I've done, was able to do so far on this. And I kind of parsed it out into some various policies about economic policies, immigration, healthcare, some foreign policy stuff, a lot of law and order stuff, and a few other things. So I'm going to talk about just a few of these. So a first couple aspects of this that he has talked about before, and you may or may not have heard about it, but he talks about this idea of the unitary executive theory. So this is a theory that he's talked about a lot, where the president, he interprets the Constitution a certain way, where the president has, and I think Attorney General Barr was also somebody that was on board with this, but a bunch of his other, bunch of the other weird attorneys he had buy into this theory. It's a theory, basically. And it's this idea that says that, it gives the president much broader control than anybody ever has over the executive branch, and including, the ability, power to direct and remove officials. And, it's very broad support. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then he goes into a bunch of the specifics of what he's going to do based on that theory. The other one, and we've heard him say it, he said this, and it's in all these videos, that Article 2 of the Constitution lets him do whatever he wants. That's his theory on that, too. So Article 2 of the Constitution does outline the powers of the president, and it does grant the president substantial authority already, right? I mean, the president is a very powerful position, but President Trump believes, or former President Trump believes, and future President Trump believes that whatever he wants is an expansive view, is the way it works. It's whatever he wants. So those two things are kind of underlying all this. But so part of what he talks about is appointing loyalists, right? So this is a big one. But here, I'm going to talk about...
You have to take a test.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about a few specific things. One is... there's this idea, he also has another idea of this, there's this idea of the impoundment power. So this was something that kind of came out after Nixon tried to abuse how resources got allocated, and it eventually resulted in a law in the Impoundment Control Act of 1974. And that limits how a president can what a president can do in terms of impounding funds. But with immunity and potentially pardon power, which I don't think he even needs for this because this is an independent, the president can do this by himself. What his interpretation, he talks about this in these videos, is that he can control the money. So he can control, he can decide, he can impound funds and refuse to spend appropriations without needing any congressional approval. And especially if he violates that 1974 act as an official act, he can do that now. He has immunity to do that. So he can violate that act, and he talks about doing that. So he wants to decide what he's going to fund, what he's not going to fund. So he can do selective.
And when he wants to fund it. I mean,
Right.
he'll change his mind.
Right.
These are all little carrots that he's going to be using.
Right. Yeah. Probably. Yeah. For sure. Because he's transactional.
He'll take it back and forth.
So he will selectively fund whatever he wants and defund whatever he wants.
When he wants.
And that'll be completely based on his personal and political preferences. And that completely reshapes the federal budget. Like there's all this talk of...
There is no federal budget.
Right. There is no federal budget because he can do whatever he wants unilaterally. So that's thing number one. That's a real thing. And this is not like, it's a theory. And no, this is now, with this immunity ruling, this is now something he can absolutely do. So...
Don't say he can. He will.
He will. Yeah.
No, he 100% will.
So some other stuff he talks about is, we talked about the sort of loyalists and all that. Other stuff he talks about in those videos and is policy about control over the federal agencies. So basically with immunity, if he needs immunity, he may not even need it. He has basically complete control like over agencies like the FCC, the FTC, and he can appoint loyalists and ensure they follow his executive directives without concern for legal constraints.
What do you say? He can appoint loyalists. He's already told you that's all he's going to appoint.
Right. But before people would hold it back, say, oh, no, you can't drill down in these organizations like that. Well, now he's going to because there's nothing going to stop him.
No.
And that will mean all these agencies will become rubber stamps for, again, whatever he wants.
That means he can tax people when he wants to. He can change the tax law.
And again, some of that will come back to this funding. Like you were saying, he'll use that as the weapon.
Yep.
Like if you want to do this, if you want this funding, you're going to have to do what I say.
Yes.
And so he could defund the EPA, the Consumer Protection Board. He can defund whatever he thinks we don't need. And he's talked specifically about doing that. So there's also supposedly congressional power to check the president. We already know that's a little bit been limited in the past, but with immunity, that obviously is weakened even more because what's anybody going to do? No one's going to bring any cases or anything because why should they? If he's immune anyway, it's going to be a waste of time. And I think... and I think this is going to be very destabilizing, right? So for our allies, they're not going to know what policies we have because the president will not be constrained to adhering to those policies, even if they've been enacted in law.
And agreements that you make with him, you don't know if those are. He may get a wild hair and say,
right,
yeah, we're not going to do that anymore.
Exactly. Well, he did that to a degree, right? I mean, he did some executive orders with that kind of thing, and now he'll be able to do that with impunity.
Right.
There'll be no recourse because what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So another thing he talks about a lot is he really wants to rein in the free press, right? So he's criticized the media and he calls it, of course, he calls anything he doesn't like fake news.
Of course.
So if you look at what could he do, he talks about in these videos, he talks about changing the libel laws. Now this one, to me, I still feel a little bit about exactly what that means and what he could do with that. But there's a lot of people, experts, if you go read up about this, that are concerned that he could do various things by getting, particularly in the area of like anonymous sources. So, a journalist will potentially have to disclose anonymous sources. This will make people less likely to whistleblow and things like that because they're more likely to get in trouble for it. So I think it'll greatly change the what sources journalists have for information. That's one thing. Another thing he talks about in this a lot is this idea of
Okay, but stop for 1 second. So the free press, though, that's in the Constitution.
Well, I mean, it is. But again, he has immunity. So, but these are some of the things he wants to do and that he could do, right? So this is one way by changing these libel laws, he could effectively limit the free press without technically saying he is limiting the free press, right? Because he could basically make anonymous sources not a thing anymore, and then that would mean there's less sources for journalists to go with. So and of course with that funding stuff, he can also do some things there. But so that's one thing, the libel laws. And again, it's hard to say exactly what that could do, but one of those could be impacting anonymous sources. Another thing, though, he talks about is the Section 230, which he wants to Section 230 today allows these social media sites carrying information and sites carrying information to essentially have some immunity from prosecution for the content created by their users, right? So he wants to eliminate Section 230 and make it so that lawsuits can happen like about everything that's ever on social media, right? So without those protections, social media platform would have increased legal risks hosting content deemed defamatory by anybody with good lawyers, right? So they'll be under that blanket. Now, exactly what they'll do with that and how that will work, I don't know, but it definitely could be. I think it definitely will be more censorship on those platforms, which is something they always say they don't want, but they want censorship of the stuff they don't like. They want their stuff to go out there freely. So that's a big one, and this will also constrain them removing misinformation. So there'll just be a firestorm of misinformation now, as if there isn't already.
Right.
Yeah. It'll be a surge of misinformation on those platforms. So now getting back to these federal agencies, right? So with this immunity rule, he could issue all kinds of executive orders telling FCC, FTC, other things to interpret Section 230 the way he wants. Mm-hmm. And then that would be, they would have to do that then. And there'd be no constraint there because there's no, even if his executive order is illegal, or doesn't comply with Section 230, he can't be prosecuted for that.
But the other people can be prosecuted for doing something illegal,
and he can pardon them or guarantee him pardons. He can even sell them pardons.
He doesn't have to pardon them. Are you kidding?
No, he doesn't have to, and it's all going to be a loyalty test, right?
Yes.
If you're loyal enough, I'll give you a pardon. But if you do anything I don't like, you won't get the pardon.
Right.
So
and I might give you the pardon now and then, but next week I might decide not to.
Right. So he could decide. So he'll be able to do that kind of stuff.
And then also, you read a thing about the university that he's going to start.
No.
In Agenda 47.
He talked about university in there.
Yeah, he's going to start a free university for everybody called the American University.
I guess I didn't pick that out as one of the things I was concerned about.
You know how he's funding it? You should be a little concerned.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff we're not going to talk about that I'm not going to get to that we should be concerned about. But I just picked out a few that were like biggies.
He's going to get billions of dollars that he's going to collect by taxing, fining, and suing the large private university endowments.
Right. I guess that's similar to what I'm talking about with these. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. He's going to try to destroy. Well, this is the way all authoritarians do. They have to destroy the press, destroy education. Right. Those are key.
Yes.
So, in terms of using the Justice Department on its enemies, he's been talking about that for a while. He wants this retribution. He said, "Oh, I don't want retribution. I want fairness," or whatever. I don't know, whatever nonsense he's saying. But
he wants revenge.
But with a compliant Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court has showed, they'll be completely complicit in whatever he wants to do, and absolute pardon power. He would have absolute, control over what DOJ does, and he could absolutely run roughshod over the Justice Department. So the DOJ was established post-Civil War, and the Ethics in Government Act in 1978 was passed to prevent abuses like those seen during Nixon. However, with immunity, he doesn't have to comply by that anymore.
I'm telling you, man, people have taken shots at officials for a lot less than this. How does this guy walk around without looking behind his back all the time?
Well, it's been this movement of the Overton window. Like, it's been, we've had one freedom taken away and one norm taken away, every day, for 10 years, almost 10 years now. And now we're like, these things that are absolutely insane are just kind of, no one's talking about it. Like, it's just normal. Like, by saying it publicly, he thinks, see, nobody said anything. It must be okay. It's what was the Seinfeld guy, look, no one cares.
Yeah.
It's like that, right? So yes, since he has immunity now, he does not have to comply with that act that was put in place to try to constrain Nixon back in the day. And, so obviously he'll try to do a retaliation. He says as much. He says he will do that, and he said he would do it before, but he was constrained by law, by fear of law. Now he won't be constrained that way at all, and he'll certainly do that. He has an enemies list and retaliation plans. He wants to target individuals he labels as communists, Marxists, and other pejoratives. He has expressed intention to root out those perceived as threats, and this could extend to treason. Okay, so they wanted to go into that because he's used that word, and he's talked about how he would call what these people are doing treason, and this could lead to severe consequences, even death, for those he's targeting. And as Lisa says, maybe it's just those threats is all he needs to try to get those people in line or to shut up or whatever he wants them to do. So he may not actually conduct those things, and maybe that would finally be the straw that broke the camel's back. I doubt it. I don't think anyone would care. But at this point, I don't think there's a line. But he might use those as things, kind of threats to people that he would be serious, because you could see a scenario where he could do that. There's a scenario where he could do those things. And I would say, like, I want to do an episode that sort of looks at some of this and says, what are some of these things what's the likelihood or the viability? How can you do this? And my first pass in everything that I've looked at here, a great deal of it is viable. Like, he could do this. He absolutely, could do a lot of it. I think the full revising or repealing of Section 230 is a little tougher, because he would actually need, legislation to do that. But he could effectively destroy it by using the immunity and pardon power. He could effectively eliminate it, even if he can't get a majority in Congress to do it. If he gets a majority in Congress, he could probably, change it or revise it. But if he doesn't get that, I think even then he could effectively get what he wants out of it. And again, I am looking for an expert to rebut some of this and say, hey, well, this won't happen, or might happen, or will. I do want to do some of that to see how much of this can be undone. But as I look at it, and I review a lot of this stuff is actually absolutely viable. He could do a lot of this stuff. And that means, at the end, with all the stuff I've already said, and I've got more, but with stuff I've already said, what we're talking about is completely like just running roughshod over all the federal agencies that would now be, just puppets for whatever agenda he wants. It would all be full of loyalists, and they would do whatever he wants. Those agencies did, constrain him last time.
Yes.
And his heroes down in those agencies, down at a desk somewhere, not necessarily the higher ups, that did effectively constrain him last time. That won't be there. So there's all that. So, and there is a lot of stuff he talks about rounding up and detaining undocumented immigrants, and that stuff is horrific if he really does. And again, it looks like he could do it. So he wants to expand ICE. He wants to use the National Guard, maybe even the military. I think he could do it all. I don't see what would constrain him on this if he has immunity and as well as pardon power and basically a Supreme Court that's completely complicit in it. I don't see what would constrain him unless he had any care about public pressures. But otherwise, I don't think there'd be any legal constraints on him at all. But so that's another one. But so that's out there. A lot of people are talking about that. But another one I want to talk about is this thing he talks about. Another one of these kind of quasi-legal things he talks about with. So this was the thing that he did, and then it got. So then now this has been overturned. So he did a 2020 executive order creating Schedule F. This one was to reclassify civil servants as political appointees.
Right.
And that would enable him to fire those deemed disloyal. That plan was revoked by President Biden, but Trump's Agenda 47 includes reimposing Schedule F. So with immunity, he may not even need immunity, but with immunity and a compliant Supreme Court, he could re-implement Schedule F. And this would allow him to, and I guess we're already kind of talking about running roughshod through civil servants, but this would allow him to replace thousands of regular career civil servants. These are just regular folks that people have like bureaucracy desk jobs. They don't have freaking agenda.
Right.
Right.
Nor any power.
But now they will have an agenda because they'll only put loyalists in all those jobs. And, they do have kind of power because there is some power at the low levels in these organizations. I mean, they do have They do just put the stamp on things and have it move forward or not move forward. So some of those positions do have power, but so he could basically, if he restores that Schedule F, which he says he's going to do, and as far as I can tell, there'd be nothing that would stop him from doing it, particularly since he now has immunity along with a compliant Supreme Court. Then he can certainly do that. And what that does is he can go deep down into these organizations and basically fire just regular old career civil servants, probably the ones that are like 6 months away from getting Social Security, and they'll, whatever. But I mean, there's a ton of them, right?
Right.
There's also the Office of Personnel Management and Worker Protections. So the OPM has tried to strengthen worker protections, but with immunity, Trump could fire the head of the OPM and appoint someone supportive of Schedule F, and he will, because that's going to be key to making it happen. And he will then use those designations, and he will also can do it by. He doesn't even have to have the Senate on his side because he can use the acting designation like he did last time. So even though they were not approved as actual cabinet members or approved for the appointment that they were given, they did it as they can do it as an acting whatever, right? So he'll do it with acting people, so he won't worry about whether they have had Senate confirmation or not. They can still do things, which I've always thought was weird, that you could do the job. There was no constraints on an acting person. It seems like they should have more constraints on if you're not approved by this. What's the approval process if you can do the job without being approved?
Right.
Why have the approval process? Right. And he talks a lot in these videos, and he has talked at other times about this idea of he likes the acting appointment. So he doesn't care if they get approved by the Senate. He'll put them in anyway. So this will be, the Stephen Millers, the Jeffrey Clarks, the Kash Patel, Michael Flynn, Steve Bannon. He's used those specific names as people he will put in place. And they're known, obviously, for supporting pretty crazy stuff.
Is it Manafort back in the picture, too?
He's talked about having Manafort again, too, yeah. So anyway, I guess that's probably enough on that topic.
You're a big effing bummer today.
But I guess I do want to try to have, I want to try to do an episode about this that sort of temps down the panic. But as I went through this and said, oh, maybe it's not as bad. Like, he won't be able to do these things.
But to us uneducated.
Well, but I said, like, as I go through this and look at it, and you look at, particularly if you throw in immunity, pardon power, and a complicit Supreme Court or a compliant Supreme Court that will basically rule in his favor on pretty much anything. There's no, I don't see any constraints here on him. I mean, like I say, a few. Like, he might have difficulty changing the law of Section 230 if he doesn't have the majorities to do that, but he could sort of effectively change it by these other means, right? Where the law is not different, but it effectively is because it's being implemented in this way. And I talk about this a lot on this show about we have these laws and then there's no enforcement of these laws, so they don't mean anything. Like, why have the law? And we have a ton of those laws that have no enforcement mechanism, so it's illegal. But what happens when somebody breaks that law? Nothing happens. So obviously they break that law. So, as I look through this, I was actually looking for, it can't be that bad. And I was really, really discouraged at the end of it that this stuff he wants to do, he's going to be able to do now that he has immunity. Particularly,
it's also making we all have to be Christians, right?
I think Agenda 47 doesn't have that in it.
No, but 2025 does.
2025 has a lot of that stuff in it. Yeah, and again, that's another one for another day. That's 900 something pages, and it'll be harder to pull out some of those. But I have identified some of those, and I don't know if this show would ever be enough to pull out more than a couple of those. 4 or 5 out of again 900 something pages that he knows nothing about. But again, I'm saying you don't even need that one, which is what's the project? You don't even need Project 2025 as 2025. As bad as it is, you don't even need that. Just go look at what's on his website, Agenda 47.
Yeah,
that's enough to be a bit concerned about.
Oh yeah.
So that's I was really looking to find examples where this is just people running around with their hair on fire for no reason, and for the most part, it's all. I mean, at least all the things that I talked about. I mean, you could probably pull all the ones out of that were a little bit like that, but the ones that I talked about today, I think they're all viable. Like, he absolutely has expressed an interest in doing this. It's important enough to him that he made it part of his Agenda 47. He's talked about it a lot, some of the things we've talked about. And so, yeah, he will do it. He will try to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And the whole question then is, can he do it? Like even if without a majority in Congress, which he might get. But even without that, the question would be, even without a majority in Congress, could he do these things? And are we just running around with our hair on fire? Well, I think he could do a great deal of these things, even if it's in some cases only sort of effectively doing them, not necessarily throwing that law out or doing that. But he can achieve the same thing because he can violate the law with impunity because of immunity, and also he could between immunity and pardon power and a compliant Supreme Court. Everything that he tries to do will go to the Supreme Court. Well, how are they going to find? They're going to find in his favor every time. So I think because they've shown that hand now. I think in the past, like I said, as much as you say they were totally partisan before, I'm saying now they've said, oh yeah, we're 100% on board with the rioters on January 6th.
Yeah. Oh no, they no doubt.
Yeah. So and that's the message they're sending with this ruling. It's how they wrote it. It's clear as day. So again, I was looking for ways to say these things were overreacting, and I came away with the other way. Like, oh no, he really can do all these things.
I'm not happy now.
Yeah, it's something to and again, a lot of people are talking about Project 2025, and I think that's valid. But man, you don't even need Project 25 because you can't walk away from this. This is the stuff on his website that he says he wants to do.
Yeah.
So he can't distance himself from that. You can't say those are abysmal ideas. No, these are your ideas.
These are your ideas.
This is what you say you're going to do.